Good morning, everyone. Good morning, and welcome back. Welcome back to the PorscheCooled Podcast. My name is Michael Barth. This is the podcast where we talk about all things Porsche. If you've been here before, you already know that. If you haven't been here before, welcome. There's lots of episodes for you to catch up on if this is your first episode you're listening to. But this is Owner's Stories, and Owner's Stories happens every Tuesday. And Owner's Stories is where I chat about with fellow Porsche owners around the world about their PorscheCooled story. We'll call it PorscheCooled story. And the story basically begins when you first started thinking about Porsche and how long it took you to get your first 911 or your first Porsche, whatever it may be. Like I said, Owner's Stories is not just about 911. It's not just about water-cooled. It's not just about air-cooled. It's about all Porsches. So any Porsches is what we share here. It's just the community. It's just the passion, all those things that we enjoy about the brand. So anyway, today we have Joey coming in from Vancouver in Canada. I know Joey mentioned to me that he spent some time in Los Angeles. I don't know a lot about Joey's story, so I'm going to learn about it along the way with you guys. Usually I have a bit more of an insight. Today I don't have much of an insight. All I know is Joey has an air-cooled 911. And we'll take it from there. But he's going to be online very shortly. We do these through Zoom. Zoom is the best way to do them. The sound quality is getting better with Zoom. They're improving every day, so I think the audio quality is not so bad. All right, enough of me talking. Let's get Joey and let's talk about his PorscheCooled owner story. Okay, so welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to the PorscheCooled Podcast, Owner Stories, number 23. And today we have an air-cooled story, actually. And I know I had a comment from. Actually, it wasn't a comment. It was a review on Apple Podcasts, where you can review and rate the podcast, which helps us gets noticed. I can't talk this morning; it's very early. But someone said, it's this podcast is primarily water-cooled. They love it, but it's primarily water-cooled. Well, Owner Stories is what. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to do Owner Stories, because, I own a water-cooled, I own a 997. My mate Steve, who does the podcast with me on Fridays, he owns a GT3 997. So the whole idea of Owner Stories, as well as connecting with other people around the world, was also to get air-cooled stories on the podcast. You know what I mean? And Steve doesn't really like talking about things he doesn't really know about. I don't mind so much. I'm happy just to sort of dive in and get it wrong and get it right sometimes. So I don't have a problem with that. But Steve likes to be more precise. Anyway, that's what Owner Stories is all about. Anyway, I've got Joey waiting here. Joey's coming through from Zoom as well. We're recording this on Zoom as always. Joey's joining us from Vancouver, Canada. Welcome, Joey. How are you?
Thanks a lot. Welcome. Thanks for having me on.
No, I'm glad you reached out. I'll just let the listeners know that Joey, like a lot of people, reached out to me through Instagram, through DM. It's one of the best ways to get me, either through PorscheCooled or through michael.barth. Just send me a message about your story. So Joey, as we said before we start recording, I always like to ask the first question. So you're in Vancouver, but you lived in LA, correct? Is that what you mentioned to me in the message?
Yeah, I'm kind of a rare breed. I'm a born and raised Vancouverite, actually a third generation Vancouverite. So that's kind of rare. But I kind of ended up moving down to LA and was down there for about a little more than 5 years, about 5.5 years. And just ironically, just before kind of the whole COVID chaos hit, we moved back to Vancouver. Not because of COVID, but just
to go back home. Yeah, just to go back home. Yeah, I know how it feels. I'm dying to get back to Australia, actually, so I really do know how it feels. Yeah. Anyway, so let's get into the Porsche part of it. Let's get into the story. So everyone has their first memory. I have my first memory. It seems it's a common thread. Some people really didn't have Porsche on their radar for a long time. They really didn't think about it until they were an adult and they started thinking, I want one of those. When did you first start noticing, 911s or Porsches and started thinking that, hey, maybe I'd like one of those?
Well, I can know, wanting a 911, I'd wanted one for quite some time. So definitely in my teenage years. But if I go back and actually think, when you've asked that question, I was thinking about it myself. What really can I say is one of my first memories around Porsche? And it's actually kind of a Porsche, but not really. I was a little kid, and I can remember being in the backseat of my mom's car, and we were going grocery shopping and pulled up into the parking lot. And I looked over and said, "That is a really cool car. What is that?" And she goes, "Oh, that's a Carmagia."
Oh, okay. Yep.
So it's not a really Porsche, but it's got the design heritage. And I guess that was my first kind of inkling where I kind of started going down the road. And then you kind of grow up and you're liking that. And, kind of had a Volkswagen thing growing up. My Nana and Papa had a 68 Fastback Beetle, which I thought was the coolest kind of car.
Yeah.
Which actually was my dad's that he ended up giving to them. And then my very first car that I bought was actually a Volkswagen Scirocco.
Okay.
So, and it was at that time I ended up getting that car because one of my good friends, he actually had a 914, and I thought it was the coolest car ever. I loved it. And I thought, wow, Porsche, I never thought I could afford a Porsche, but I thought maybe I can afford one of those one day. And I was really looking at that. And, that's when you just got your license, and I was just looking around. And so I could afford a Scirocco, but it was kind of the Porsche I wish I had, so to speak.
Yeah. So you've had that, as a kid, you've had that association with air cooled. You've had that taste of air cooled. Carmagia is, I have to admit I always forget about talking about the Carmagia, but I also remember that, seeing them and thinking, I can't afford a Porsche, but maybe I could afford one of those, because at the time there was a period there where they were quite inexpensive. But they're not now, are they? They've gone up in price quite a lot.
Oh no, I still look like everybody who's kind of into the stuff, and wow, could I find one? Oh, if I could find one that's kind of nice and not a complete rust bucket. Wow, I'm actually spending a lot of money, so it gets a little difficult to kind of do that.
So you're in the VW brand. You don't get an old Beetle or an old Fastback or anything like that. You get a Scirocco, which is a very good car by all accounts, right? I've never driven one, but they're supposed to be a very good car. So how long did you own the Scirocco for? How long were you driving that car for?
I actually got that when I was in university, and I pretty much drove that car right into the ground, because as most people in university, right, you put your money into the car. I think the only upgrade I ever did to it is I bought a Momo shift boot for it. That was my splurge, because everything was going to tuition, and everybody who knows who's going to university, books are probably the biggest ripoff of anything else, and you're just spending hundreds of dollars. So I drove that car literally into the ground, and my best friend at the time, I can remember, he was over at my place when I ended up selling the car to this couple, and I'm going, oh my gosh, they took it for a test drive, but do they realize the car is going to gas out? It's going to conk out. Because I was driving it home from school one day, and I got 3/4 of the way home, and it just gave out on me. I had to let it rest. I had no idea what was wrong with it, but I just knew this car's done. So I ended up selling that car.
You drove it into the ground, basically. You drove it into the ground. But it's a good driver's car, isn't it? Scirocco, isn't it?
It's a great drive. It's got a good engine. It actually had the same engine as someone I was with at the time, an old GTI engine. So it was actually perfect. It was great. It handled amazing. It was nice low. It looked good. People still liked it. It was red with kind of, a black trim on it. So it was a fun car to drive. I really, it's not like I would go back and buy another one, but yeah.
So you're in I think someone else has been on Owner Stories that had a Scirocco as one of their cars. I vaguely remember someone telling me they had a Scirocco, unless it was something else I was listening to. And I have heard they're good cars. So you're in the Volkswagen family.
Yeah.
You're in the Volkswagen family, which we all know is, Porsche's parent at the moment. So what happens then? So you sell the Scirocco. Are you carless for a while? You're at university, you finish university, and then
university. I'm going to start working, and I'd always liked different things. So you can probably guess, the Scirocco. I actually bought a Saab 900, which I loved.
Okay.
So it was a good handling car. It looked different. I was the only one who had one, so that was it. Again, it was another car that I drove really far until I couldn't afford to fix it anymore. And then kind of life happens, and you kind of have to get responsible and kind of do things. But that was when, ever since I got rid of those cars, it's when I really wanted a Porsche. I mean, I really wanted a 911.
Sorry, Joe, back to your Saab. Because, I'm seeing a trend here. You really do like interesting cars. You're talking about common gears. You bought the Scirocco, Saab. So the Saab 900 Turbo, just the standard Saab 900, is it?
It was a Saab 900S, and it was it was a 5-door, so the hatchback, black as well, and it had that unique. It was a manual, so it had that unique kind of pull-up knob where you got to get into reverse, and it handled amazing. At that time I was having to do a little bit of winter driving, and it was amazing in the snow. So it was a great car. But being in Vancouver, we don't get snow that often, but it was a great vehicle. It was fun. It was sporty.
The Saabs are coming back, aren't they? They're coming back into, the prices are starting to go, and people are starting to notice them again, the 900s.
Oh yeah. I mean, that back then too, I still always wanted, something in the brand of those cars. So like, I actually wanted to get a Vigan, but there was no way I could afford one of those. Right. So I was getting kind of a similar body style. It was one of those. I would love one of those. I even look now back at the Saabs too, some of the older, like the 16 valve 900s and a really good one. Like, you're right. They're coming back. They're not cheap. Like, they actually are.
Saabs are funny though, aren't they? They're a love or hate relationship. I mean, some people just hate the shape of them. I mean, even when they were out, people hate the shape of them. But I kind of like them. Those Saab 900 turbos, with that shape is just. And you look at it today, and it's aged pretty well. It really has aged pretty well. You know what I mean?
It has. I mean, they're. Some of the later models are pretty attractive looking vehicles. I mean,
yeah. So we've got a trend here. We've got a trend here of unique cars. You're buying unique cars, and you're driving them into the ground. Basically, you're driving them. You're enjoying them. So you have the 900. And then you sell the 900, and then you said life gets in the way. What happens then, Joey?
At that point, I had got married. You end up having kids. You kind of you're trying to buy a house. You're trying to do things. So I had my kind of lament. I ended up having to have a Saturn for a couple of years, which I really, still to this day feel bad. It was the only American car I ever owned. But you make some sacrifices to be able to afford something, and then after that, got an Audi. It was a perfect car in that term of life. An A4 Avante. It was, the wagon side, so it could fit everything in it. It was great for, having a child, and it was still fun. And the 4-wheel drive, really, I was like, oh, this doesn't feel like a sedan. I could actually drive the car.
No, I owned one of those as well, Joey. I bought one from new. I had an Audi A4 Avant, S-Line as they call it in Australia.
Yeah.
And it was a great car. It was for a wagon, for a estate as they call it in the UK. It's a great car.
Yeah, it was not only functional, but it's still the Audi side gave it a bit of sport to it, and you felt that you were actually driving. So
okay.
So I had that, and then as life was getting on a little bit out there, I was like, man, I really want my 911 now. I really want my 911. Like the bug was still there. I'd wanted one for so long. And then I kind of went.
Where are you now, though? Sorry, Joey. You're still in Vancouver, or you're now in LA?
Yep. Oh, still in Vancouver.
Okay.
Still in Vancouver, and this would have been about maybe 10, 12 years ago. That itch was so bad, and it was right before stuff started going stupid with air cooled. I mean, it was already there, but I'm still thinking, man, I got to be responsible still. Like, I can't really afford the 911 that I'd really like. So what can I do? I started looking at 912s.
Okay.
So I'm looking at 912s like you are right now.
So 12 years ago, you're looking at 912s.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when they were very good prices, when they were very cheap.
Yeah. I can remember test driving one that I'd found, and went all out there, and I think it was like $16,000 or $15,000. And this was a guy who was in a club, and it was well maintained, perfect car. And I didn't end up pulling the trigger because I really wanted a 911. But I thought, well, if I can't afford one yet, I can still get everything that is pretty much a 911 in this. But anyways, I didn't pull the trigger on that. And then, life kind of happens, stuff goes along, and I had a change of kind of situation. And I was selling a house, actually, that I was in. And the realtor that I was selling the house with had a 911. He actually had an 88 silver 911.
Okay.
He had put a whale tail on it though, and at the time I actually had an E36 M3, and we did a couple drives together. And I remember once we swapped cars, and I was like, oh great! I was just loving, like I was like, it made the itch even more. And
so Joey, let me interrupt you for a second. So you had another great car. You had an E36 M3 as well. So you had the Audi, and then you bought the M3. Is that what after the Saturn?
Actually, I had the Audi, and then after the Audi, we ended up needing a second car. I actually bought right before that. I only had it for about 6 weeks. I had a 320. Actually, it was a Japanese car, convertible.
Okay.
That some old lady cut me off, and we ended up writing that car off. So I took the money from that, and I bought the M3 with that.
Okay.
So I was driving the M3 for a couple of years.
Right. Nice car. So, okay. Yeah. So you find this silver 911. Is it for sale?
That was actually my realtor's car.
Okay.
So he was driving it, and we would go on drives together, and that made my 911 bug like almost even more insatiable. Okay. It's like now he's got one, and we're out driving. It's like, oh my gosh! And this was right at the time I can remember when Magnus Walker came out with his movie.
Okay.
So my kind of Magnus thing is kind of come and gone, but still it was something like, oh, okay, this is cool. I started going to YouTube and watching as many different videos and movies as you could find. And it was, so as you can tell, my addiction was pretty, I was everything.
Strong. So that's 2013, right? I think Magnus Walker's video came out in 2013 from memory.
Yeah, 12 or 13 around then.
Yeah, and I think, to put it, and I know some people, I know some people don't like Magnus Walker. I know Steve's not a big fan. But, I am. I still like him. I still think he's, reasonably relevant, and he's got a great Porsche collection. You can't deny him of that.
Oh, no.
But, you're right. When that video came out, Joey, and if you don't remember it, if you weren't in that period, when it came out, there was nothing like it. Do you know what I mean? No one was really at the forefront of doing what he was doing. And then he was doing more modification, wasn't he? He was doing the custom cars.
Yeah.
And he was selling
everything
them.
Was kind of outlawish.
Yeah. And it was, it really did work. That video that he did, it really did work. I mean, it started his career basically with, Porsche sponsorships and all those sort of things. So you're watching those videos. Your realtor had the 911. Did you get a chance to go for a drive or drive your realtor's 911?
Yeah, on one of our drives, we were basically 2/3 done, had to stop off, get something to eat and do that. And then he's like, you want to swap cars for the ride back? I'm like, yeah, let's go 100%.
So that was it.
So that's when it got even more. And he knew I really, really liked 911s, and I was always looking and trying to find one. So just before I tell you how I found my 911, watching all the videos, I came across another video that really has been probably one that I've watched. I keep going back to, and it came out around the same time, just after.
Okay.
It's a guy, I don't know if your listeners so far know of Jack Olson. He did a video that came out about that time called "One Car Can Do It All."
Okay.
And he is he's based in LA, and he was a writer, and he did a 911, a 1972 black 911 that he's kind of Frankenstein and modified himself.
Right.
Actually, it was one of my last Instagram posts that I had thrown up, saying that he's tuned his car so well that he's got brakes or something like that from a 993. And he wanted one car that he could drive to the track, that he could take out for picnics. It's a great video. I really suggest, if anybody hasn't seen that one, to go out and watch it and see him going around Willow Springs, whatnot. So what is it called, Joey?
I
think it's One Car to Do It All.
One Car to Do It All. Okay.
Yeah, but if you just look up Jack Olson, it's pretty much there.
I haven't seen that either. I'll be honest. I haven't seen it.
It definitely, to me, that's sealed. It was a black, 72 with a ducktail that he had on it. I'm like, that's it. Like that, come on, that's it.
Okay.
So I'm in love with that.
Let me just interrupt for a second. So you watch all these Magnus Walker outlaw sort of 911s.
This other one's a bit of an outlaw 911, modified, make it your own, personalize it. Is that what you start to think? You think, okay, I want to get a 911 and I really do want to make it my own. Is that what you're looking for? So what do you start looking for now? Once you've got the bug and you want one?
I'm looking for something and I'm saying, okay, what do I really want in my 911? I want a 911 that's kind of in the air-cooled side. I want something that looks cool, that's going to be timeless. I'm probably a rare breed where I said, I actually want a narrow body. I don't actually care about the big. I want it to be narrow. So I have a narrow body. And then I'm looking around and saying, you know what makes the most sense? I want the G body style. I really want a G body.
Okay,
so I got a G body. And then the more research I'm doing, I'm looking around, seeing, okay, this part of this part of that. You want an SC or because that body style was the longest running body style, right?
Yes.
Multiple engines. And then I came across and said, you know what? I want the 3.2 engine. It was like the workhorse. It was called like bulletproof by so many reviewers.
Yeah.
So I wanted a 3.2. And then I'm looking at it going, oh man, gearboxes, the last little bit, they went from the 915 gearbox to the G50.
Yes.
Okay, I want the G50 because it's a much better gearbox. It's smoother, cleaner. So when you start doing the research, 87, 88, and a little bit of early of 89, right before they switched over to the 964, that's the only time they did a 3.2 with a G50 gearbox. So
yes, so you're looking for the one that is the sought after one. So how long ago was this? Yeah. How many years ago was this?
So this would have been right before I moved to LA. So this would have been, I'm looking in 2013. I'm looking all 2013, probably started the end of 12. I was looking for that kind of car.
Okay. And as a lot of the listeners know, that 1988, 1987, 1988, early 1989, isn't it? The 911 with the G50 is the pinnacle at the moment. It is the one that people want. They want that gearbox. It does go for higher prices than the other models. Mm-hmm. So you're looking 5 years ago, so the prices are a little bit less. How long? So you moved to LA. So you look. Sorry.
I would say the benefit is too, when I was looking for that car, that is not that. I got my car right after Singer came out. So all of a sudden, people wanted a 964. 964s, everybody hated them until pretty much Singer came out, and then it started becoming popular.
Yes.
So it wasn't easy to find my car because, like you're saying, that was the one people were looking for before.
Okay, so you're in LA now, and you're searching for the car.
I'm still actually in Vancouver.
You're still in Vancouver. So do you start searching for the car in Vancouver, or you... No. You do. Okay.
I'm searching for this car in Vancouver. I'm laying there. And at that time, and for most of my career, I was actually did a lot of work with China. So I'm up late at night, right? So lying in bed at night one night, talking to, one of my factories in China at the time, you're laying in bed with your phone up in front of you like this, just like before you go to bed, what time it is. I get a message from my realtor. The house had been sold, all that, but we still maintained friendship and whatnot. He's on Pelican Parts and sends me a link. He says, hey, look at this. It just came up. This has got to be, 11:30 at night, 12, 1 o'clock, something like that. So I'm up there, click on the link. I flip over to it. I see this black on black, like black wheels. The rims are all black. The interior's all black. Everything's black. I think I sent you the link to the actual, the photos of the guy who was selling it from Tom that he had put up. And I'm like, it's a 88, so the same car that he has, except in black, which is what I want. The 3.2, the G50. It's got a ducktail on it already. I'm like, there's nothing you need to do to this. This is beautiful.
Yeah.
It's got a little higher mileage on it though. But I don't care. I don't know if it's because it was late at night as well, and I wanted one so bad. I click the link, and I just sent an email out saying, "See your car, love it. I'll give you full ask. Let me know."
Okay.
That's at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Can I just go back? The Instagram link you sent me has the white 911 on it. Oh, the black one. Okay, I didn't go far enough.
Yeah.
This is not the car you bought, though. This is the car that inspired you to buy the car you found, is it?
Nope. The black one there that's on that,
yeah,
that's actually the car I bought. Oh, and that was actually the photos from the ad that he used to sell it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So these are the photos. Okay, I've got to let the listeners go to this Flickr site.
It's a Flickr account.
I haven't given your Instagram because you don't have a lot of pictures of your car on your Instagram, do you?
No, I've kind of kept
it private.
Instagram on and off, and
yeah. So I'm trying to remember what it's called. It's Tommy. So if you go, I'll just tell the listeners, Joey, if you go to Tommy G500, if you go to Flickr, and you search for people, make sure it's clicked on people, because if you just clicked on photos, it won't come up. And just scroll through till I think it's about the third page or something. Where is it? Third or fourth page? Fourth page I'm on, and there's a black G body there. It's fantastic actually. It's really, really good. Tell me more about the car, Joey. Keep going.
So I was in love with that car, and so I said I'll give you a full ask, whatnot. Didn't think about it, right? You going to work the next day. I get a message from him about a day and a half later and saying, "Hey, are you still interested? I've got a lot of people interested in the car. One guy's on his way to test drive it, but you're the first guy who messaged me, so you're first up if you want it. Let me know."
Okay.
So I'm like, sure. I'm like, what the heck? If I can get it for a PPI and it passes a PPI, because I'm not even able to look at it, then sure. So I researched, this is in California. The car is actually in California.
Okay.
So I started doing some research. Okay, so who's a good place for doing a PPI there? I don't really know. End up picking, I think, TRE Motorsports to do it. They're kind of a Porsche, kind of more air-cooled, but they do lots of Porsche.
Sorry, Joey, before we get into the PPI side of it, just tell the listeners exactly what the car was and what you have purchased, and then we'll talk about the PPI. So hopefully they're looking at these images, but just explain to them what the car was and what was special about the car.
So this is a 1988 911.
Yes.
And it had been, the only real modifications were there were a few modifications. It had a ducktail added to it. Completely, it's a black car, black interior. And something that was different, which I really liked though, it's got Fouche wheels, but they're completely black. Even the rims are painted black. So you've got a black car, black wheels, black tire, like everything, it's all black. And it really, it really stands out by doing that. Just like, I think the only trim on it, is just the odd little bit of silver. Even around the windows, which is usually silver, that's done black.
Yeah, it looks great actually. It looks really, really good. And then it's got a different steering wheel as well, which actually works really well.
Yeah. Yeah, the Scirocco steering wheel he had on it that had Alcantara on it. I used that until that kind of wore out a little bit, and that's one of the only changes I did is I swapped that out after about 2 years to a Momo wheel. So that was quite nicely in it.
All right, so that's the car. You contact the guy on Pelican Parts. He gets back to you, and then you have to organize a PPI. You're in Vancouver. The car's in LA, in Los Angeles or California. So how do you go about it? Tell the listeners how you manage to get someone who you can trust and do the inspection for you.
So I spent about a day and a half kind of researching and who in LA would be good for it. I come across a few people, and then you want to find out, check out the reviews and see what things are. I kind of settled on TRE, and then I call up the guy at TRE and say, "Hey, I got a car. I want to do a PPI. How much will it be?" And do it because tell me a little bit about it. Say, "Okay, it's got 134,000 miles on it, so it looks beautiful."
Yep.
Obviously, this guy hasn't seen it, and he's telling me, "You know what? I can tell you right now. Just save your money, but don't bother. But if you really want, I'll do the PPI for you." I'm like, I want this car. I just really want. I know it's high mileage, but I want this car. The one thing I've known kind of even later now is like these cars are meant to be driven, right? Yes. They're not meant to be garage queens. So if you've maintained it, it doesn't really matter the mileage. Like just as long as it's maintained, these cars will last forever, right? And especially the 3.2, it's a bulletproof engine. Like that's why I wanted it.
But Joey, 130,000 miles is not that high, is it? I wouldn't think that for an 88 911. 130,000 miles is not super high.
Well, everybody always wants under 100,000 miles. Everybody wants lower.
Right. Okay.
Most people were kind of down that path. I don't think that's a big deal. It wasn't a big deal to me.
Yeah.
I was already in things. I was probably already a bit in love with the car at the time. So I contact, I then kind of go back and forth with Tom a little bit. And he's like, oh, great. The TRE is not very far. He was actually if any of your listeners know, around LA, he was actually in Silver Lake. So that's really close to where TRE is, which is just in the valley as well. So, because I know exactly where that is. So he goes out, drives the car out, and gets it done. And then I get he calls me after. He goes, oh, yeah, the guy's going to call you and tell you about it. Okay. And he goes, but I didn't know this much about Tom. He's a big car guy. Like, he loves cars. And he had bought the car and knows what they're doing. So when he had bought the car to sell it, he bought it and really tuned it up, did all these things to it. So it was in perfect running order. Like, there's nothing you needed to do.
Okay.
So came out with like a great thing. So the only issue on the car, he said, was the guy found a small, tiny little crack in the windshield in the middle and the bottom. He goes, I didn't even know that was there. He goes, Don't worry, I'll get it replaced. He goes out and finds a brand new windshield, 911 windshield for the car. He says, I don't know where he got it. He says, I found the Holy Grail. It's the perfect thing. All done. Puts it in. I'm like, okay, great. I go in and wiring the money. And this is now I think I found the car in November. I think we ended up closing the deal sometime in December. Right.
So the PPI showed nothing. Everything was fine. Compression was fine. There was no rust. Yep. There was no issues at all.
The guy was shocked, actually. He was like, this car was so, there's nothing to worry about. So I wire him the money, and then it's in California. I'm still in Vancouver. And then, I end up, I know I'm going to be doing a little bit of a transition. I ended up taking a job in California at the time. So over Christmas, whatnot, we kind of didn't talk for a couple weeks, whatnot, ended up moving down to LA. And I'm like, man, we just haven't connected. I'm like, oh, well, let's see. So reach out to him, say, hey, Tom, it's Joey. Like, I'm here to pick the car up. He goes, oh, wow, you're here. Great. So it's stored in his friend's shop. He goes, no problem. Come by, pick it up. Is there anything you want? Do you want me to wash it for you? I said, oh, if it's at the shop, does it have an alarm? Because I know I'm going to get cheaper insurance. And he's just like, no, throw an alarm in and great.
Okay.
So I go and end up picking up the car and driving it back. And I think that week, it was, my second week in LA. And ironically, it was a time when they had a crazy, it doesn't rain in LA, but when it does, it rains really hard.
Okay.
And it rained so hard. I'm driving a car that's so low to the ground, that's air cooled, and the water is like rising in bits of the street. And
oh, really?
It's very different. It was like,
oh my God. Scary. Yeah. So you really trusted the seller here, didn't you? You really trusted him. So you kind of left the car with him.
Yeah.
Yeah. He gave you an indication somewhere along the line that he was a genuine guy and he was a trustworthy seller. Yeah.
He seemed like a really nice guy. I did a little bit of research on him as well too. He was actually in the, not anymore, but he was in the movie industry. He was a director, producer for stuff. And
okay.
So he was kind of and this was his hobby.
What was the reason for him selling the car? Did he have other 911s, or did he wanted to upgrade to something else, or what was the reason he gave you for selling the car?
So like I said, this was a bit of his hobby. He bought and fixed up some cars and then sold them. Part of the fixing them up and making that was something he did for enjoyment.
Oh, okay.
Between, periods of not, doing a commercial or a short movie type thing. He's like, well, what am I going to do?
Okay.
But he, at that time, and even still, I think when we left, he had a GT3. So a newer GT3, I think a 997 GT3, he said.
Okay.
So he was already up there, but he liked these type of cars. He had another version, almost exactly the same, except he used it for track racing. So,
Right. Okay, so you've picked up the car. You're living in LA now. Is that correct?
Yeah, living in LA.
You're living in LA, so you've got the new life in LA. You've got the coolest looking 911 in black on black. How was it? So you picked it up. On it was raining. It was flooding or something in Los Angeles, right? So it wasn't very enjoyable. So when was the first time you actually got into the car and drove it and thought, wow, I've got something really special here?
So, I started driving it out to work, and you're driving it through in a bit of the highway. And I was lucky enough that the office was in the valley, and I was living in, my fiance and I were living in LA on the other side of the hills. So I was going counter flow. So there's a part, as soon as you can get out of the traffic, you're pretty open on the what would it be? The 107 or the 101 right there. So I started just hammering it a few times, just really letting, and the thing that was really interesting, a lot of people say the faster you drive, the more scary it gets and you see things going by. This car, I swear to you, the faster you are, the safer you feel. Right. It actually feels safer going about 70, 80, 90 miles an hour than it does 40.
Okay.
Like it actually doesn't like driving slow. So I drove the car. So I did, what you're supposed to do.
Are you sure about that, Joey? Or is that just the way you like to drive? You just like to drive fast?
There's a bit of both, but I will tell you, it does. The car, it handles better. So you got to remember too, this is the type of 911 that we're talking here. This is before it got really technical. So we're not talking about any power steering, right? So you have to be moving in order to do that.
Exactly,
right? So,
exactly. So you've owned the car now for how many years? 5 years, is it?
I guess it'd be 15. I went down there. So yeah. So
5 years.
5, 6 years.
All right. So you've got the car, you have the car for a little while. The first, just to get you to remember back when you first picked it up.
Yep.
Were there any surprises? I always like to ask this question, like you got the PPI done, nothing showed up, everything was great. The guy changed the windscreen out, the car's perfect. Were there any surprises in the coming months that you had to get fixed or, work on?
No, there wasn't anything. Stuff slowly as the time went on a little bit, but right out of the gate, no. The only surprise that I'll say is my first oil change.
Okay.
I was shocked at the amount of oil that these cars take because it's, air cooled. I mean, the sheer amount of oil is just unreal.
Right.
You're like, wow, that's why this is an expensive oil change.
So do you do your own maintenance on your car, or you take it to a specialist in Vancouver or LA when you're in LA?
So when I was in LA, this is the next part of my, I was telling you about, I still was in touch with Tom. I think he was friends with a guy who had a shop at the time. And so I took it there for the first couple of times. And then Tom says, yeah, across the street, I'm opening up my own repair shop called Mistress Auto. And it was based purely on doing a servicing on air-cooled Porsches.
Okay,
that's
perfect.
It. And he said he wanted to set it up as kind of an Italian Euro style place. And I mean, it was beautiful inside. Like it didn't look like a normal shop. And so I thought, who better to look after the car than the guy I bought it from, who's now running his own shop. I mean, he knows everything about this car because he's the one who tuned it up to sell to me. So, and you're kind of on my way to work and the way back. So like, perfect. So I took it to him for the entire time that I was down there.
Okay, perfect. So you're in LA. You're in LA for a few more years. You've got all those great roads at your doorstep there in LA.
Yes.
How is the car when you decide when you move back to Vancouver? How is the car when you're owning it in Vancouver and driving it in Vancouver? Was it the same experience?
Somewhat the same experience. I mean, I really used the car. Like, fiance and I really enjoyed going out for drives. Didn't like being in traffic, but we'd get up early on a Saturday and just drive it. Angel Crest Highway up and down. We'd have a certain route that we'd end up going through one of the canyon roads and take the PCH. Sometimes we'd end up driving and realize, I guess we should turn around. We're almost at Santa Monica. But we just love to drive. So much so that when we moved back to Vancouver, actually drove the car from LA to Vancouver.
Okay, fantastic.
Took the Pacific Coast Highway right along as far as we could, all the way up, and took 3 days to drive all the way there and cut inside and went to Portland and up. But so we drove.
And how was the car? Reliable as ever? No issues?
No issues.
Fantastic.
The the only thing that I kind of got an issue with was the air conditioning. So I had to recharge it once a year, but cost more to try to find or not even find it if you're trying to fix something than it would be to just
But that's a common issue, isn't it? The air conditioning, it's not always that reliable, right? It's always a little bit, half and half. So you've had the car for, let's go back to the car again. Let's go back to, you said you changed the steering wheel. The images on Flickr showed that steering wheel. So you said that you changed that over. So tell us a little bit more about that steering wheel, if it's the classic one, the one that everyone buys. What else did you add to the car to personalize it? Is there anything else you added to the car?
You know what? I only did one other thing. So it's a Momo wheel. It's not the Prototype.
Okay.
I can't remember the exact name of it, but it's more of a deep dish wheel. I liked, the wheel coming out forward a little bit. So you give it a different experience. And I tell people as I drive the car, I feel like I'm driving a go-kart, and that kind of wheel kept it like that. I felt like I was driving a go-kart with that when I had that wheel as well.
Okay.
So I've done that. I think the only other thing that I added to it was a phone mount, believe it or not, for my phone. And I got, it took me a while to find one, but I was on Redline, and they have very specific mounts for your specific 911.
Yeah, they're great. They're great mounts, aren't they? Mm.
Oh, it's perfect. Goes around one of the dials and just sits to the side of the dash up there, and it's perfect. I wouldn't get anything else for it. So
yeah, I don't have one of those, but I'm going to get one for my 997. I know that Steve bought one, I think, but I know a lot of people have them, and they're a great mount. I'm just looking at the images of the car on Tommy G500's Flickr again. Yep. I keep saying Instagram, Flickr. And the interior leather is in immaculate condition, isn't it? It's in such good condition, this car. I mean, this is the thing where mileage, I don't think the mileage really matters. And I don't think it had a lot of miles on it when you bought it. But who's ever owned this car, the condition, whether or not it's been redone, the interior or not, it's just in really, really good condition. And it's, I think that's a selling point. You can't be too hung up on the miles, can you, when you see the car in person? It must have been great when you first picked it up. You must have been just so excited about it.
Oh, it was phenomenal. It was literally, I was giddy. So, it's something you'd wanted and looked at, and I never thought I'd be able to actually afford and have one. And then to have one, it was just phenomenal.
It's interesting though, when you said about Magnus Walker and being and liking those videos and when you were watching them, because this car actually reminds me of a guy in Sydney who owned one of Magnus Walker's ex cars, a turbo Carrera, Paddington Outlaw. And he had a car that Magnus Walker used to own, which was, very similar to this, black on black. It's very, very similar. That's what it kind of reminds me of, even though it is a different model. But it's a great looking car. So there's nothing really you did to it. You didn't really have to, all of the ownership, all you've done is a phone mount and re-change the steering wheel. I guess to not an Alcantara steering wheel, right? You went to a full leather steering wheel, or you kept the full leather wheel, so it lasts longer. Even though as good as that Alcantara wheel, the Sparco one on the car did actually look great, Alcantara doesn't wear so well, does it? After a while, especially on the steering wheel. It was,
especially with you've got in LA, it's a little warmer sometimes, and your hands get a little bit sweaty, and you're driving kind of wears off. So once it wore off long enough, I actually liked the steering wheel so much. After I replaced it, I actually screwed it to my wall in my office at work. Okay. So I'm like, it was sitting there.
That's pretty cool. So what about the, I always like to ask this question. What about the exhaust side of it, the sound of the car? Was it modified by the previous owner, or was it stock? No.
The car is pretty much stock. Literally, there isn't anything else done to it. I can tell you the suspension's been tweaked a little bit and done a bit, but it hasn't. There's nothing really done. And I'm not. There's some things that I might like to do to it, but I'm also kind of of the mindset I'll get to that when I can outdrive the car as it is right now.
Right.
I think I'm a pretty decent driver, and I drive it fairly well, but any 911 has so much to teach a driver. So, the car still has lots to teach me. So, and I've been driving it for a while, and I still think I can get faster with it.
So what is the limitations of the air-cooled? to people who don't know when you're driving it, what is the limitation with speed and et cetera? Is there anything you have to watch out for when you're driving an air-cooled fast that you can tell the listeners who are not so familiar with air-cooled about?
The only thing I would say is in some of the air-cooled cars, and it's not really because it's air-cooled, I think it's the older some of the cars are, they're lighter. So you tend to, and some of the air-cooled cars don't have the safety pieces on it. You don't have ABS brakes. You don't have anything like that. You have to pay attention to the car, and you have to really be on your game. So if you're driving a newer 911, you can kind of make the odd mistake, or I'm not saying fall asleep at the wheel, but you can kind of, get a little bit relaxed. If you're driving in an air-cooled car, to take from what, I think Jack Olson says in his videos too, if you don't respect the car and if you don't do that, it will remind you sometimes pretty aggressively that I'm here. So,
yeah, it's almost like classic cars, air-cooled 911s. Your reaction time has to be a little bit more sharper, doesn't it? You have to be, like you said, you have to be alert. You have to be aware that, that there are none of those modern aids, and you have to control it. It's all up to you. Yeah. It's up to your skill. So you have to be, you have to be a lot more careful, I guess, if you haven't been in a classic or an air-cooled before and you're coming from a modern 911, which, still has aids that cut in and help you and assist you. So yeah, it can be an issue if you're not being careful. So
I'd say you really got to be thinking ahead. That's probably the one thing I've learned the most in the driving is not just driving fast, but driving at any speed with this car is try to anticipate further along ahead, because the car can spin out, right? If you let it. I mean, I haven't yet, but I felt at times, being able to a bit, but you got to try to anticipate what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And pick your line. I'll say that's been when you're driving, pick your line.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's a great driver's car. That's the main thing. It really is a great driver's car.
Yeah.
So upgrades, etc. You said there might be some things you want to do. Do you want to talk about what those things would be, or you're not really? They're not necessary at the moment.
I haven't settled on some stuff, but the next thing I would do would probably end up being something more along the suspension line.
Okay.
And then maybe take a little bit of the weight out. I mean, there's always some aesthetic things you like to do, and like the Formworks key. I know it sounds silly, but if you've seen the Formworks keys, I remember when they first came out, and I was like, oh, I want one of it. No, I've flipped back and forth, and it's been years now. Yeah. But it's something like that I'd just like to do too.
It's pretty cool. You should get one.
Yeah, it would. I mean, it would go. It's perfect for the car, right?
Yes.
It's perfect.
So the suspension on your 911 is just a stock. It's just OEM suspension, right? It hasn't been upgraded to any other suspension. You said it's just.
I believe it was upgraded. Like it was. So here's the piece. The first year ended up getting the car. Actually took it on a road trip to San Diego.
Okay.
And driving to San Diego. Not used to some of the off ramps and where to go and whatnot, and not really totally sure. End up taking an off ramp that's got an A and a B.
Okay.
Well, weren't really sure which one we're supposed to take. End up taking the A, and oh no, it's supposed to be the B. So I turn over really quickly, and I kind of do a little bit of a Dukes of Hazzard and kind of launch the car. We kind of slam down and maintain control, but did that. So when I took it back and got it all fixed up, of course, at Tom's shop, at Mistress, he goes, "Yeah, you hit the ground pretty hard, so you blew out all the suspension, and I almost punctured the hood. Like that's how hard I hit it."
Wow! So
he redid all of that, and he said he wouldn't tell me everything he did, but he says I've tweaked you and kind of upgraded you, and it's great. You're going to enjoy it.
That's great. So tell me now. Now you're not in LA. You're in Vancouver. And you don't go to his shop anymore. So have you found someone as good in Vancouver to look after the car?
So I found somebody that I like, and there's a few good places in Vancouver. So I found somebody that I kind of like, that I kind of trust. Right now the car is kind of in I've kind of parked it for the winter kind of type thing, and heavy rain here, and I found a leak in the car. So I got to get that fixed too, which you don't get that heavy rain that often in LA. So it just never. It just was never there. But it's also in a spot that's, as I researched, pretty common. for those cars where you can sometimes get a little bit of fog in your gauges into the clock area.
Right.
So I just got to get that fixed before and kind of get some paint jobs done. But mechanic wise, I found a guy that's not going to charge me dealership style pricing, and they know their stuff. And they were actually the guys that I kind of looked them up ahead of time and had them do a kind of a inspection, because once I drove the car and kind of self-imported it into Canada,
yes,
you have to get it kind of looked over in order to get it registered. Well, I wanted to get it looked at before I take it there, so they kind of looked it all over. And
okay,
these guys know their vehicles as well.
So bringing cars from America into Canada, do you have to pay duty? Do you have to change anything so it has to be to Canadian specifications? What's the process for that, Joey?
So yeah, you do. Except my car was old enough that I didn't have to do everything. Okay. So Canada has daytime running lights. The US doesn't. So you have to have those turned on. Well, my car's old enough that didn't have to. It was fine the way it was. So I was glad that. You do have to pay your kind of tax, like kind of GST on it when it comes into Canada. But I had been there. This was another kind of funny piece. When I was down there, I've been down there for so long. The border inspection guard, or the border guard, when I was coming up, was saying, great, I'm filling out this paperwork, doing all this stuff. I just happen to have a nice guy, right? It's like, I can tell you're not bringing the car up to sell. It's your car. So put whatever value you want on it. I'm going to do a little form to say, you're not going to have to pay duty.
Fantastic.
Wait, how did that happen? When I went to register the car, though, and they did the inspection, nobody could figure out what form this guy did. It was like 3 times, no, you got to pay your duty. You got to pay your duty. Government wants its money. I'm like, I don't have to. So they had to call supervisors. They had to refer to a book. There's some bizarre, odd little thing where he had checked off a box saying, no, you don't have to pay. So that saved 35, I think, close to $4,000. So I'm like,
oh, that's good.
That was good.
Yeah, fantastic. And I mean, we all know that the 88 911s have appreciated, so you've got a good investment there as well. They really have, I know in Australia and the UK, they have actually appreciated quite well over the last few years. So you've definitely got a good car there. Now, you've got this 911. You're obviously really happy with it. It's a great looking car. Yeah. Is there anything else on your radar? And is there anything else that you think, well, can I have 2 911s in Canada? Or, is this one fine for now? Or fine forever, I should say. Fine for a long time.
This is, as they say, I just keep saying, this is a car I want to keep forever. Like, I do not want to get rid of this car. So this is a car I want to pass down, generational type thing. Like, I love it. The car, what I would, my him and haw, what I wanted to get, which I knew I couldn't afford at the time, and I still now, I really wanted to get a 1997 993 4S with that was the year they had the split windscreen in the back.
Yeah.
So, 4S, great. You're basically buying a turbo without a turbo badge. So I would, but I mean, 993s, it's just silly. Like the pricing that those are going for now, it's just absolutely insane.
Yeah, so. The 4S is not cheap, is it? I mean, the 2S I think the 2Ss gain more money than the 4S, though, don't they? I think the 2Ss in the 993s are more expensive. I'm just thinking about in Australia, I think they're more expensive. The 4S is a nice car, though. It'd be a nice car to have alongside your 88. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm sticking air cooled, the other thing which I still like and I've still looked at, even when I was in LA a bunch, I still kind of like a 914. I think the body is just cool. It takes me back to when I was, young and had the Scirocco, and our friend had his 914. I just thought it was the coolest thing ever. And I still think it's neat. I've seen the guys that have just come out, with the new, they're prototyping the all electric version, right? With the Boxster.
Yeah. So if you were looking for a 914 though, would you go the 4-cylinder or would it have to be the 6-cylinder? Knowing that the 6-cylinder is very expensive.
Would I like the 6-cylinder? Yes. It's a different engine. Okay. So liking one is yes. Finding one is another thing.
Yeah, they're very hard to find. Yeah.
And a lot of the ones that I've seen that are 6s, people have kept them in almost like mint condition. And and that just raises the price even more. And like, I don't want something that's falling apart, but you want something that's been driven. I want a driver's car. So I don't know if that'll happen. Yep. Maybe I'll, I wouldn't even mind a 996, right? I'm okay with the headlights. The people, kind of dog on the headlights, but a 996.2, I'll take, if I'm in Canada, I'd still would like a 4S, right?
Yeah, that would be, a 996 4S is a great looking car. That's a great variant of that 996.
Yeah.
You have to be quick though. The prices are going up very, very quickly. I think the 914 for me, I mean, I like the 914 as well. I mean, you see a lot of them on, Beverly Hills Car Club and those sort of places, and they're, they've got really beat up examples. I kind of always think the 914 would be a really good project car. You know what I mean? Like if you found one that was
my friend, that's what he did.
Yeah, reasonable condition, Joey, and just make it a little bit, make it special. Make it like, your 911 sort of thing. Just make it special, make it your own. And just spend some time on it. Because the ones that come up in 914s that are in reasonable condition always look a lot of them look a little bit boring to me. They look a little bit sort of flat.
Yeah.
I think it's a car that wants you to mod it a little bit, that wants you to not hot rod it, but makes you want to sort of just do a bit more to it.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a car that's been unloved, and people who like it, but I think a lot of people traditionally haven't liked it. But I think it's a perfect car for, I know it's probably overkill, but somebody to do a little bit of an Emery, Rod Emery kind of a piece to it. I think that would be phenomenal, because the car's light, mid-engine, you got perfect center of gravity.
Yeah.
And if you could, add some of that specialness, keep the car, but just, kind of oomph it up a little bit, I think that would be cool.
Yeah, true. Hey, that's a question actually. You've got Rod Emery doing the 356s. You've got, Singer doing 964s. You've got Gunter Works doing 993s. Is there anyone in LA? I don't think there is. Is there anyone that's doing special 914s? There's not, is there?
There's nobody. Like I said, I think it's another, kind of one of the cars that people didn't like.
Yeah.
It was 914s. It used to be 964s.
Yes.
And, still a little bit 996s, but 996s are coming back. And, obviously 964s came back. 914s are kind of just waiting. They're waiting to be loved again.
Yeah, they are, aren't they? Because you can still get, beat up ones quite cheap than the 4-cylinder, that's for sure. They're not expensive. In fact, they're probably cheaper than a 912. I think the 912s now have gone insane.
Definitely cheaper than a 912.
That 912 that just sold on Bring a Trailer for like $79,000 plus fees. It's just insane that they're getting that much money. Yeah. I'm starting to look at 912Es now, and I know that's not a favorite of everyone either. But I'm starting to look at them just primarily because the prices are better.
That's why, like I told you way back when I was looking at 912, just because it's. The pricing on some of this stuff goes crazy, but yeah.
So the question that the listeners always enjoy this one, when someone's coming to Canada, to Vancouver, or they could be going to LA. I mean, LA, everyone says, in the hills or whatever the drives. What is the drive you would say if you're going to hire a 911 or you're going to hire a sports car and you're going to take it out for a drive in Vancouver or LA, whatever you prefer? What is the roads you would recommend to the listeners to try out?
LA is pretty. I mean, I know somebody said this before, but still, Angel Crest Highway is the road. I mean, it's a driver's road. You'll see a lot of anybody drives that road with a car, motorbikes like crazy. I mean, you've got to be careful, mind you. It can be a little bit dangerous, but that's a great road. And then if you just want to cruise in LA too, I mean, you go up through the hills, through the Palisades, hit Pacific Coast Highway. There's nothing like driving for miles with the ocean beside you. Just like that's a great ride. Vancouver, you want sea to sky. Vancouver to Whistler. I mean, you want to go when there's not as much traffic if you can find it. But Vancouver to Whistler is like it's an amazing drive. I mean, it's another. You got the ocean on the other one side of you. You got twisty roads all over the place. The odd little stretch where you can drive. But it's
fantastic.
Since Vancouver had the Olympics, they widened it, so it's a lot safer and easier to drive now. So it's a good road.
But the drive you did from LA to Vancouver, is that a good one?
Yeah. it's good. It was long.
It's a real journey. Was it 4 days? You said 3 or 4 days to do it.
I think we took like 3 days. I mean, we stopped off an extra day in Portland, and kind of that. But I mean, just the pure driving, it was about 3 days of driving. The one piece, I mean, there's Northern California. There's some great driving up there too. I mean, really great driving. The problem was, I'm like, this is, and I told my fiance, this is like the best road to be a passenger.
Yeah,
because I have to pay attention. Like, it was fun driving, but I couldn't look at anything because you're driving. I mean, there's so many spots where there's no shoulder. And
right.
You're just like, oh, but it's fun. And like we said, if you've got, an air cooled, and especially, like the 3.2 like mine and older, without any power steering, you're working. Like, you're actually working. So that makes it a totally different experience to drive.
Okay, so before we go, because we're up to the hour, but before we go, if someone is looking at an 88, they've got the money, they've got enough cash to buy it, and they're going, okay, my first 911, which was your first 911, my first 911 is going to be an 88, 87 Carrera. Would you say, yes, that's a good choice?
100%.
Okay.
And this, for the same reasons why I sought out this, I go back to the engine and the gearbox.
Yes.
You want a G50 gearbox, and you want the 3.2, a bulletproof engine, and it's been the best gearbox. I mean, it's as the one other piece of advice is make sure the car's been looked after. You don't have to have the papers, but if you get a good PPI, the guy can, you can tell if the car's been looked after.
Yeah.
So
I think what's great about your story, Joey, and I think the listeners will pick up on this, is one, like I said from the beginning, you like unique cars. You love driving your cars. And I think what you found is you found a 911 that doesn't make you really, and I know we're always looking, but it's almost like you're not wanting anything else. You've got the one which you're so happy with. And, if a 993 comes along or a 996 comes along, so be it. But really, you're quite satisfied with what you have. And I think that's what's great about your story. And you found something unique, but really it's still quite, I'm going to say OEM, but it's still quite, it's pure, as in it hasn't been, it hasn't lost the essence of the 911. It's black on black. It's got the, the ducktail, the wing on the back. It's just, I mean, it's a beautiful car. You really have done well. It's a really, really great car.
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple little tiny things too. I don't know if you noticed in some of the photos. One of the things which even they picked up on, and I had to explain to them when I imported into Canada, is the dials are changed by the RPM and the speedometer.
Oh, are they?
They're actually angled and turned. So they're turned, and I asked Tom, like, why'd you do that? He goes, oh, well, you do that in racing.
Oh,
so
yes,
that
yes.
your speedometer and your RPM should be at the exact same spot. I'm like, that's cool. So there's little things in my car that are like that most people don't notice or probably wouldn't care or think it's weird. I'm like, no, it's actually pretty cool. So when you're punching and driving it, I love my car, and I didn't know the reasoning for that. I didn't actually notice it on your photo. I can see it now on the photos on Flickr. But I have seen other cars on Instagram, other 911s that have done that as well. I was never really sure of the reasoning behind it, but it looks cool. It looks cool. All right. Yeah. That's great. Thank you, Joey. Thank you for being part of the podcast today. Thanks for reaching out and sharing your story. I think the listeners are going to really, really enjoy it. Is there anything you want to tell the listeners before we go? It's up to you. The only thing I would say is, I think you've said it a bunch of times as well, is, you know what, if you're able to, just get the 911 that you can now. You can always change if you want, but get a car, and if you get it, drive it. It's not something, I'm not the guy, and I've had friends who are, I want to put as few kilometers on my vehicle as possible and all this. That's a bunch of garbage to me. A 911 is a driver's car, and if you want to get into a 911, get one and drive it, and I don't think you'll ever actually look back.
Great advice. Great advice. Thank you, Joey. Thanks for being a part of the PorscheCooled podcast. It's been great talking to you today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on, Michael.
That's great. Thank you so much. All right, everyone. That was PorscheCooled Owner Stories number 23, and that was Joey from Vancouver, and he's really, really cool all black 88 911. Okay, that's it for today. Thanks for listening, and bye for now.